Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes. I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here at Bulletproof Selling, more than 2 years now, we've been out there spreading the message that hope is not a sales strategy. And we are here as often as we can with a variety of salespeople, sales leaders, trainers, and consultants to make sure that we can bring the lessons from the battlefield into the realm of business so that you can increase the performance of your sales, your salespeople, and of course, the results of your teams. Now, at this Bulletproof Selling series, it's an interview series. Since day one, I've been bringing on some pretty smart people here to share with us. And these have been Hall of Fame speakers, best-selling authors, consultants to Fortune 10 companies. I mean, you name it, we've probably had them on. The coolest thing about this, though, from my perspective, is that not only do I get to bring on really, really smart people in the field of sales, but that every single episode we build a sales system that you can use. And every sales system that we've brought on here, I've incorporated as well to help my sales. So we get to learn and grow together here. We get to make sure that wherever we are in our sales journey, that we are building better systems and we are removing hope from our strategy one piece at a time. And that is why it is my pleasure today to bring on our guest, Alex Schlinsky. Alex, welcome to Bulletproof Selling, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean. What an awesome intro. I love it. And I love the idea of like getting the lessons from the battlefield so we can really help salespeople out there deliver, more effective conversion rate processes to not only serve their own self, but of course, serve the prospect too, which is super important for effective selling.
Absolutely. And that's something that we learned about bulletproof salespeople because, believe it or not, all of the high performing troops that I was able to be alongside, the US Marines, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, I mean, these folks were bulletproof, not because they had superpowers, but because they were using things that I think you support, like good culture, like great training, like
Yeah.
continuous improvement. So I'm curious to get your perspective, man. Tell me about your journey through the field of sales, Alex, what you do today, and who are the people that you're out there helping.
Yeah, absolutely. First, I have to say, thank you so much for your service to you and everyone else out there. I think that is a very important thing that I want to start the podcast off with. I don't have that personal experience, but we're all indebted to you guys. So I just want to express that gratitude first and foremost. In terms of my experience in sales, both of my parents were entrepreneurs as I was growing up. My mom was a serial entrepreneur. She ran a Subway shop, not like Subway, but her own version of it. I believe it was called Sandwich Emporium, which is a funny store name, before I was even born. Then she ran an art studio by herself for 10 years, had over 1,000 students. My mom is an incredibly effective saleswoman. She's a Jewish mom, if you guys get the archetypal, stereotypical model of that. She's very focused on making sure her kids get exactly what they need, but she does it with integrity and a panache that's very, very hard to mirror. I think a lot of people use sales as a crutch of like manipulating people. My mom wasn't manipulating people. She was supporting people effectively, and watching her do that coming from a place of love and integrity and care, it really made me super keen on understanding like how to influence people effectively, which really got me interested in how the human brain works and psychology and entrepreneurship in general. So when I went to college, it was only natural that I wanted to go into psychology and learn more about the human brain, decision making, kind of like why we do the things that we do, especially when it comes to sales. Sales is not just conversion on terms of like dollars and cents, right? It's convincing your parents to let you go on that trip with that girl that you like, or convincing your children to not go with that girl that or boy that he likes. It's everything related to convincing, specifically related not just to financing, but our time, right? Because time is actually the most valuable resource we all have. It's something that can't be renewed. Thus, making sure every conversation you have is really some sort of exchange of time and understanding how to effectively manipulate, sell, convert, whatever term or use you want to use, whether it has negative or positive connotation. Just in general, the sense of making sure you know how to sell regardless of money is really important. I learned that from my parents. When I went to college, I needed some money. So what I did was I spoke with my next door neighbor who is an attorney, and he asked me to start posting for him on Facebook. This is when Facebook just had released business pages. It wasn't even ads yet. And I would post for him every single day on Facebook for a few months before I went to college. When I went to college, I asked him if he knew anyone else that he went to law school with in my area. And he ended up sending me about 20 attorneys that he went to law school with, which about half of those became clients. So very quickly, Sean, I actually had a figure business, $10,000 to $1,000 a month, just for posting on Facebook. But the sales aspect was so easy that I think I kind of got skewed a little inappropriately on what I thought sales would be like. Referral sales are also known a lot as lay down closes, is what some people would call them, where it's like, oh, you know Lloyd, which was the name of my attorney that I work with. Oh, you know him? Here's money. Like, it was that simple and that easy, especially for people that have such a high risk tolerance, like personal injury attorneys, where they're investing crazy amounts on their business all the time. So I think that was an interesting experience to learn from, like realizing how easy it could be if you have strong referral partnerships. And that's one of the things we can discuss today, Dream 100 strategies. So I did that, worked in college, built up this business. After college, realized pretty quickly that I did not want to become a clinical psychologist for many reasons that are probably not a good use of time on this podcast to discuss. But then I realized, I'm already running a business that's making money. How can I, multiply this success? That's when I started building out my agency for personal injury attorneys, built that to 7 figures in about 2 years with my amazing wife. And then I started my mentorship program, which is all about culture and community, called Prospecting on Demand, which is a community for agency owners and entrepreneurs to build better businesses that better facilitate their life. And one of course, the main things we talk about, considering the name of the company is called Prospecting on Demand, is client acquisition and my methodology of what I call the one call close framework. Not like that I'm the only person in the world that says that, but that's kind of my mantra, my model, the 4W process to the one call close. That's really kind of the last 10, 12 years in a nutshell.
It's funny how we can encapsulate like decades of our life in just a couple of paragraphs. It's always interesting for me to hear people do it. All right, so
very unique things in there also, like that I work for the UFC, the Miami Dolphins. I had open heart surgery. Those are some really weird facts about me that anyone could talk to me about.
Nice. So with that background, then I have an odd feeling I know where this conversation is going, but I don't like making assumptions. It didn't keep anybody alive on a battlefield, so I try not to bring it into business as far as not assuming. But where do you see salespeople? Because you get to work with them. You get to work with people that have a lot of experience in sales and people that just hung out a shingle and they don't know the first thing about how to sell the service or the product that they've got out there. Where do you see these folks relying on hope more than they should in the prospecting piece of their sales cycle?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I like using the metaphor of like building a bike. There's this idea of playing business, right? And playing business is a lot to do with a bike, right? What do you need for a bike to function, right? You need just simply the 2 wheels in the frame and the ability to pedal the bike. Now, there's 1,000 different bells and whistles you can add to the bike, both literally and figuratively. Let's go with the literal version, which is you can paint the bike any color. You can add pinstripes. You can add the card to the back of it so it makes the sound like a rotor or a motor. You could add literally a bell in the front end so it dings. None of those things move you faster from point A to point B. And I think this is such a common thing we see with salespeople. Like, they're tweaking things in their sales process that really has nothing to do with their success on the battlefield, right? And I think the best way to use this specifically on this podcast is using war as a metaphor, right? Like, there's video games that are like prioritizing playing, like what war is like playing them, or GI Joes, like kids will play with them and you think this is war. It's completely different, right? That's not actually what it is. I think that's what people do in business. They're playing business a lot of times. Like, I'm going to tweak this thing on my slide deck and I'm going to, focus on making my website nicer instead of really honing in on what's most important, which is it's the actions, right? It's the inputs that you're doing to get the output you want. There's no magic abracadabra, Leviathan, Leviosa, Harry Potter magic technique that's going to magically get someone to pay you their credit card. It's just about consistently putting in the inputs that you will ultimately get the output that you want, the result that you want. And I think that's where people are really relying on hope. They're wondering, I'm spending so much time manifesting. I'm spending so much time like working on this website and trying to create relationships. Why is it not happening? And you ask, okay, like, how many outreaches are you doing? How many direct mail pieces are you sending? How many calls are you doing per day? How many outreaches on Facebook? How much money are you spending on advertising? And the answer to all of those is the minimum. Like,
whatever the minimum is, sometimes less than zero.
Less than zero, right? And that's why, they're focusing on hope or instead of busting down the door. The thing that I like to tell new salespeople, especially, and even if you're a vet, this is still really valuable to hear, but I think persistence in sales is what's the key. The reason why most people don't do any of the upfront work and relying on hope is because, they want it to be easy. They want the money to fall in their lap, which inherently everyone understands doesn't happen that way. And yet they just want it. And then out of fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of looking stupid, they don't take the actions required. One of the things that I've learned like I mentioned earlier that I became a Miami Dolphins media member. I didn't go to school for journalism or have any byline on a nice website. I just called the Miami Dolphins every single day for 2 months until I knew that they would say yes, because I was willing to hear no more than they were willing to say it. And that's one of the things that I think most people need to really listen to as a really important piece of advice. You need to be willing to hear no more than someone's willing to say it. Now, that doesn't mean one individual prospect. I mean more so in general of your sales process. The majority of your responses that you're going to get are either no response, which is probably the most common response, literally getting ghosted. Then there's no, I'm not interested. And then there's the maybes. And then, of course, the yeses, I'm interested. You have to be willing to get a lot of ghosts and a lot of no's in order to get the yes. And if you don't put the action in, then you're going to sit there hoping and praying, reading a lot of books, doing a lot of podcasts, listening to other people like myself speak, but then you still don't take action, right? So if you're listening to this podcast and this is the 5th one you've done today, and you have 6 books from Oren Klaff and other salespeople on your desk, and you're wondering why sales aren't happening, you got to bust the doors down. That's what it's going to take. Be a bull in a china shop. That's my motto.
It sounds like, and by the way, I agree with everything you just said. Without actual action, nothing moves forward on the battlefield. We can't wish and hope and pray that stuff occurs. We actually have to take action. And so it sounds like then the motto that you're coming to the table with is, let's get out there and let's kick doors down. Let's actually do some stuff. Definitely. Well, the problem that I see a lot of salespeople run into is that they don't have a lot of people to kick down doors of. They know maybe 2 or 3 prospects, or they just don't know many at all, or they've got 0. They're sitting on 0. I'd love to kick down some doors, Alex, but I got no doors to kick. So it sounds like with prospecting on demand, it's a lot about filling a pipeline. Definitely. Would you say that that is probably the first thing salespeople need to focus on if they're just trying to increase sales in general through outreach?
In terms of first thing, I wouldn't say first thing. I think first thing is making sure you have an offer to sell. But if we're assuming, right, like we mentioned before, that they have it, then that's fine. But it just in case you don't have an offer, right? You can't really kick doors down if you don't have anything to sell. You kick a door down, you knock on your next door neighbor, you're like, hey, I'm here to sell you something. And they're like, what? You're like, I don't know. What are you willing to buy? Like, I could store, we
what
could
do
sell
you
your
need?
house, I could get you licorice from the store. Like, we could do anything. You just tell me and I'll like that obviously doesn't work. But of course, inherently, if you already have the baseline, whether you're selling a product for someone else, you're selling your own product, marketing service, coaching product, solar, real estate, whatever it is, if you have something already, and now we're in the need to bust doors down, fill up the pipeline strategy. In terms of saying like we don't have any, that's such a lame duck excuse, right? Like I do hear this a lot. The way that I started, first and foremost, like I mentioned, was my neighbor. This was easy for me because I lived in a Jewish community, a small Jewish community that was very tight knit. My dad was the president of our temple. So anytime that a young person, I was, I think 18 or 19 years old, is reaching out to someone in the community that clearly wants to help the community and says, I want to help you for a low risk so you can help me. That's a really valuable exchange. And that doesn't just have to be in a religious community or affiliation. Human beings in general, we hope, like to help other people. Like there's a lot of benefit to filling your cup by helping a person, even if it's a complete stranger. We do live in a day and age right now, obviously, especially after COVID, where it seems like cold prospecting, essentially, like, I don't know you, who are you, has become a lot more challenging, but it's because it's all digital. If you remove yourself from it being all digital and you show up upfront with authenticity and integrity and transparency on how you want to help someone, you can bust down a lot of doors. The reality is most people don't have the audacity to go in person. So if you say I have 0 network, and literally you have no religious affiliation, you have no friends, you have no alumni, you have no college that you went to, you have nothing, like literally, which I
was just born today, impossible. Basically.
Yeah. Pretty much impossible. But if you literally have nothing, cool. You live in a city somewhere. There's some larger town with X amount of businesses, whatever those businesses are, whatever you provide to them. Go knock on the door. Have a conversation with another human being, not a salesperson, not a prospect, just another human being. And they built their business. They understand in some way what you're going through right now, because everyone starts at 0. And this is what I tell anyone, especially with one of the most common objections, which is, can I speak to references, or can you show me proof of work? Well, what do you do if you're at 0? Like, how do you show proof of work or references? You don't fake it or feign it. You either get a fulfillment partner that has already done this, that you get to use their results for, or you're transparent and say, look, Sean, just like when you started your business, you had no clients. No one just magically starts with one. You would be the first person that I would be able to get a reference or testimonial from. So either you can choose that you want to help me and become one of my initial clients with this risk, because there'll be some sort of risk, but here's how I mitigated that risk, right? Or you can say, hey, I'm not comfortable working with you, Alex. Because of that, come back to me and I'll find the next person. That type of transparency is very unfounded in today's day and age. A lot of people think of salespeople in general as dishonest, lacking of integrity, only wanting to get paid. If you change the script on the person you speak to by showcasing that is not the only thing you care about, but also really wanting to help them and deliver a result, which is essentially the job of being a good salesperson, then you'll be able to sell effectively. So those are the answers, in my opinion, on what you do if you have literally zero, which is pretty much impossible.
It's very rare, almost impossible. I agree. So it sounds like then you're really focused and passionate. I can hear it in your voice about the kicking down the door piece of the sales conversation, especially post COVID. To have somebody come out and say you just need to have the audacity to meet in person, which I completely agree. Anytime that I can meet in person, I absolutely do it. I get to travel a lot for the work that I do, and you better believe if I'm going to Des Moines to see a client, I'm looking up who else could I help in Des Moines.
I love
Just
that.
drop them a note. I'm going to be in town. Let's grab a cup of coffee, let's grab breakfast, whatever it is. So let's build a sales system around the kicking down the door piece, because this is something that I was just speaking with a Fortune 100 client of mine the other day around, Alex, and their chief challenge with hundreds of salespeople spread across the United States is not the product that they sell, which is one of the best in the world. Objectively wins a bunch of awards. They're awesome at that. The thing almost sells itself, to be honest with you. Where they're having a challenge is getting their people to kick down the door, to actually get out there and meet new prospects. Easy to stop by somebody that I've seen 5 times. Hey, Bob. But the challenge with that, of course, is that you just suck down your prospect pipeline. You've only got 20. You see the same 20 over and over, and your competitors who are hungry are going to grab everybody else that ever needs what you have to sell or offer that isn't already in your pipeline. So when we talk about systems builds here, Alex, because exactly what we used in the military, you better believe if a bunch of U.S. Marines are in Fallujah and they're getting ready to kick down a door, they're using a system. They're training on it because they know there is some risk involved, and they want to make sure everybody comes back from the mission and that the mission is successful. So when we talk about systems build here in sales, we trim hope away from a sales strategy with each new system. Now, the system trim, because we're trimming hope, that's the acronym we use. The T in trim is the trigger. Now, if I'm got enough about a prospect and enough about my own product and service, because we do have to start somewhere, right? We're not starting from scratch. I know what I sell. I believe in it. I've got some success stories here. And I know enough about my prospect to be dangerous, and that I've at least maybe qualified them as a potential buyer. I'm getting ready, though, to make the decision. Am I kicking down the door? And if I do, what are the first, couple of seconds that needs to happen after that door gets kicked in to be successful? Where do I trigger this system in my sales cycle? Is it before I even begin prospecting? Is it after I've prospected a little and asked some qualifying questions? Where do you recommend we kick off a door kicking system?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think the first thing, by the way, regarding that Fortune 100 client is if the team is not properly incentivized, if they're not kicking down the doors, right? Not every human being is a good fit for kicking down the doors. What I do think that's really valuable is that any human being giving it a chance, giving it a shot, the more uncomfortable you are, the more comfortable you become. Using, again, the Fallujah metaphor, like talk about stakes, right? The stakes are infinitely higher. You're talking about your life is at stake. If you knock on a door in Florida to offer solar, the chances are 3 responses. You get the door slammed in your face. The person says, I'm not interested, and they're polite. Or they say, I don't live at this house, which is a very common method to get people to stop knocking on your door, even though you own the house, right? Okay, are any of those solutions, life ending? No. Are any of the stakes extremely high? Nope. You'll probably never see the person again. And you probably will be completely fine after like 3 minutes of being maybe frustrated, potentially. So I think like using that as the stakes in mind is really important. My brother is an ER doctor, and I mentioned earlier that I had open heart surgery. I'm 30 years old, 29 years old. I had open heart surgery. My doctor can't have the attitude we just had. You Marines can't have the attitude. We can't just, oh, well, oops, I like slipped. Alex died, whatever, big deal.
Whatever. Yeah. No worries.
Knocked on the door, shot millions. Oops, my bad. This is like, hey, I knocked on the door. I stumbled over my own name and I look like a complete idiot. And the guy slammed the door in front of my face. Okay. And then what happened at the next place? So what? Big deal, right? So I think first, like lowering the stakes in your mind, number one, understanding and incentivizing the salespeople appropriately, that they're paid effectively in order to do this. Like I said, it's not for everyone, but I do think everyone should try. And why I say that is I'm a big believer of the more uncomfortable you are, the more comfortable you become. Life's greatest treasures and all of the ways to grow in life is by stepping right outside of your comfort zone. The good thing is for the things that you step outside of your comfort zone, some of them have a very low risk. This is one of the things that have a very low risk. Diving out of an airplane and doing skydiving, right, is very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but you'll always hear for people that live through it, they're like, that was incredible, and I'm so proud of myself for overcoming the fear, etc. But the risk is inherently higher, right? I mean, it's possible that the parachute doesn't work and you die, and people die from skydiving accidents, which is crazy. Like, I wouldn't do it because I have an 18-month-old son, but would I knock on a door if I started a brand new business? Sure, because the risk is really low. So I think just like understanding in human nature of how growth happens, and the more uncomfortable you are, the more comfortable you become, it's worthwhile trying. So I think that's number one. And then obviously incentive being number two. In terms of where you trigger the action on this type of door knocking, everything that I teach on outbound prospecting, whether it is actually literally door knocking or direct mail or outreach on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or calling, whatever the methodology is on any outbound process, it's always a means to an end for inbound, right? So no matter what company you run, eventually the ideal goal is that you create a math equation, which is going to be advertising. There's not really a super effective, consistent, scalable math equation for door knocking or any outbound strategy. You can get some baseline where it's like, hey, if I have boots on the ground in Tampa, Florida for solar, right? And I'm reaching, we're doing 1,000 homes a day. We estimate that we'll get, 1% or 10% of those, probably 1%, to agree to a meeting, right? So you're looking at, okay, we have 10 meetings that we book from 1,000. It's not great math, but at the very least you have some baseline. It's just nowhere near as strong as advertising, which is like, I spent $1,000 on this ad, we got this amount of people interested, and now we can go from there. There's just an inherent difference between cold prospecting and someone saying, I'm interested in solar. It's a very, very different business. And it's not
one of the things we found really helps to solve that is what we call building a target package, knowing as much as possible about the person that we're about to knock on the door of or reach out to on Facebook or Instagram. And so if the trigger element is, I completely agree, it's psychology first, understanding the stakes. If you're scared, poopless the whole process, probably not going to convert very well. But if you're really settled inside yourself, you understand the value of what it is you provide, this is not going to end with you being shot at, more than likely, unless you're in Florida, oddly enough,
or Texas.
or Texas, exactly, very firearm friendly states. Then you're likely well set. And so if we're this far along in our sales process, then the R in trim is making this thing repeatable. So what are the steps that I could execute again and again and again across a prospect that's at this point in my sales cycle where I'm ready to actually conduct outreach? And obviously knowing as much about them as possible is good. And I'm curious to get your insight into what are the things that I probably need to look at no matter what I sell or who I sell it to, so that I'm running a repeatable system. And the reason, by the way, Alex, that we do all these systems in the military or in sales, and I know you're a firm believer in this, if I know what I need to achieve in this call, and I've got my checklist in front of me or it's on my computer, it allows me to be more present in my outreach. So I'm not focused on the 7 things I have to ask. I can have a value-driven conversation. So I just want to get that out of the way for anybody that's listening to this, like, dang, this dude's anal retentive with his systems. No, they kept us alive on the battlefield. They keep us alive in the sales cycle too. So the repeatable steps, what do I need to do? What would you recommend a salesperson do, no matter what it is they sell or who they sell it to, during this door kicking process, whether it's virtual or in person?
Yeah, I love that. I think to me first is just understanding the promise of your ascension. So I'll give you a quick example. Just everyone that's listening, just play a game with me. And then I'm going to ask you, Sean, to just tell me what we're making. Okay. So I'm going to give you 3 ingredients. I just want you to tell me right off the top of your head, what's the thing I'm making? Okay. We're going to get dough. We're going to get mozzarella cheese and tomato sauce. What am I making?
Ooh, I hope it's a lasagna or a calzone.
Okay, cool. So I was making pizza, right?
Yeah,
so the funny thing is, by the way, Sean, everyone that hears me say that says pizza, and then I say it's a calzone. But for the sake of this, I had to switch it.
All right, it was pizza. I screwed it up. All right.
Now the point of it, the reason why I say that is because a lot of times, no matter what you sell, literally, it does not matter what you sell, salespeople focus so much on the features. They focus on the ingredients, right? It's like a chef that's so excited about the amazing ingredients you have for the pizza. But while you're telling them all the ingredients you have, which I did a really short version of 3, which basically every single salesperson has like 25 features they're going to want to talk about. When you say, I have mozzarella cheese, I've got dough, and I've got sauce, and you're talking about a calzone, and then you mention, oh, we're making a calzone. They're like, oh, I hate calzones. Right. You're like way, way off, because you didn't even give them a chance to tell them what the result is. The first thing on a repeatable process is making sure the result is very clear. The result is the most important thing. And we call this the ascension promise. What is the thing that's going to happen by working with us? That's the first thing you need to lead with in all cold outreach and everything, and inbound as well, because that's the first thing that's going to capture their headline. So for example, if you run a solar company, I know we keep using it, but it's Florida, so it's just a good example. If you run a solar company, and you say that over a year, we're going to save you $10,000 in, your electricity bill, that is the result. It doesn't matter how you save them, whether it's through solar or through something brand new that's just created yesterday. That's not super relevant. That part will become relevant, but you have to first make sure that they want the result before we even talk about the actual recipe in general. Imagine if you went to a restaurant and they didn't tell you any of the things that you're ordering, just the recipe of what you're getting. You'd be like, how am I supposed to make this decision?
Yeah.
This is impossible. So that's number one for sure. Definitely the most important. The second thing in terms of understanding the result, a lot of people in sales focus really heavily on just the monetary aspect of the result. I think it's really important that any salesperson understands that money is important, but it's always a means to an end, right? No person wants to be the richest man in the graveyard. My dad was a funeral director for 20 years and used to say that. And man, it has impacted me a lot, especially facing mortality at 29 years old when I realized like, oh God, it doesn't matter how much money I made. I just want more time desperately. The reality is money is always some sort of means to an end. There's a quick psychology thing I'll teach you that will be very valuable. In the 1950s, there was a psychoanalyst named Eric Berne, super famous, not as famous as Sigmund Freud, but he was a Canadian psychoanalyst, and he posited this idea of transactional analysis, which is so valuable for sales. Transactional analysis is called the PAC model. What it states is that there's 3 ego states you speak to on every person you're communicating with: the parent, the adult, and the child. The parent is a skeptical thinker, so you have to showcase proof and testimonials to make sure that they know that you will overcome their skepticism. The adult is logical, right? So you have to show that 1 + 1 = 2. This isn't the space to be like ethereal. It's to be very deliberate. This is how the puzzle pieces fit together to get this result. And then the last one, related to the money that we're talking about, is the child, which is like the big dream. My child, who's 18 months old, doesn't really understand money. He just understands the pursuit of happiness and enjoyment, right? That's the idea of what a human being is, right? Wanting to be enjoyed, fulfilled, experience things that are great. Money allows us to do those things. So when you're selling something that's strictly based on money, but you don't understand what they want that money for, you're really missing out. And this is harder to do on an individual point of reference on cold prospecting, but when you understand the market in general, it's really valuable. I'll use roofers as a quick example. If you offer roofers the ability to get more jobs because you're a marketing agency, and you ask them, like, what do you want from my marketing service? They're always going to answer the same thing, Sean. They're going to say, I want more jobs.
Right.
Okay, but why do you want more jobs? Now, if you know your avatar really well and you say, do you want more jobs because you're the one that's doing most of the roofing work yourself and dying in the summer heat all the time? Maybe if you get more jobs, you can get another truck, hire more people, and you could free yourself up from having to be on the ground all the time. And you'll see their eyes widen like, oh my God, that's exactly what I want. Now your connection to the result that they really want is way stronger than just, I'm going to get you more jobs. You start with more jobs, but you got to continue with explaining what the childlike dream was that they had, which is building a business that doesn't require them banging nails into the roof all the time. And then the last piece on this that I think is really important related to this, like money situation, is what else do they want outside of money? Tell them in your offer how it's going to help them with their time specifically and their team operations. If you can provide those 3 things in a single process, you're going to really make a huge difference for them on a repeatable system where you go there, you try to be, the idea that I'm always trying to do is disengage. It sounds very military-esque, but you want to disengage them because they're like, who's at my door? Why are they here? Whether it's a home or an office, you're like, look, I know you're super busy, but I'm the balding Jew. That's what I go by. I'm reaching out to you because I know that you have a roof that's perfect for solar. I can help you make at least an additional $10,000 per year on implementing this. Plus, it's going to save you a whole bunch of time from ever having to deal with these door knockers ever again, because you'd be like, I already have solar, and close your door.
Yeah.
So if you're interested.
I love it. So we've got the trigger element, making it repeatable. And by the way, for all the listeners out there, we didn't dive into the tactical piece of this. We kept it up at strategy, which is understanding not the features of what you sell, but the benefit, and really finding out in the psychology of your prospect. And it's going to be different for every prospect, which is why I always I harp on salespeople on this. You have to have person-to-person conversations, whether it's on the phone, via direct, the messaging, whether it's, Zoom, whatever you do. You got to have a conversation because everybody's going to have that one goal that they are chasing. And if you can align what you sell to help them achieve that goal more faster, better, cheaper, more responsibly, more ethically, whatever they care about, you will have very, very few hurdles to cross on the way to the sale. So we've got the trigger, we've got making it repeatable. Now, in any system, we want to make sure that it's improvable. That's the I in trim, Alex, because we realize, the market changed a lot in the last couple of years. If I'm selling the way that I would have in 1985, not going to be as effective today here in 2022. No. So how would you recommend that I take this basic system that we've built and make sure that I'm improving it? what do I want to do on a monthly, quarterly, annual basis
Yeah.
to really make sure that it is staying up to date with the market that I'm selling it to?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So, a couple things that I always do. One, if you're hunting for the no, that's a really effective sales strategy in general. There's three responses to every sales offer, which is yes, no, and then the most common, which is maybe. Maybe is veiled as let me think about it, let me talk to my partner about it, let me move money around, like those types of things. That's a maybe. That's by far the most common response. No is actually the least common response, and yes is the response most people want. If you're hunting for a no, meaning you're getting really clear by giving them permission to say no, because a lot of people would rather not say no to you, Sean, ghost you, and then just that's their no inherently. But if you get a no, it allows you to learn from it. Because in my format, especially when you're doing inbound advertising, if you're doing inbound advertising and someone says they're interested in your product, and then you do a whole sales pitch with them, and then they tell you no, that's really valuable to immediately identify, hey, I appreciate this. I'm not trying to overcome a no. A no is an answer. It's a no, right? If you're saying no, can I learn from you what was missing? What did you want? What were you looking for? This is an opportunity to not only fix your sales process, but also your offer in general, which is extremely valuable. In terms of fixing the cold outreach process, one of the things we recommend most importantly is just tracking how many door knocks, how many pieces of direct mail, how many reaches on LinkedIn, how many messages, like those types of things are really, really key. So you can create an equation to simplify the process so you can test one thing at a time. So if you go and do a direct mail campaign that's a very specific direct offer that has a 30-day money back guarantee, as an example, and you send out 1,000 pieces of direct mail and get 10 people interested, well, you'd probably expect that the 30-day money back guarantee is not something that you'd want to try again. You may want to try a different offer. You might want to do, hey, it's free until you get this result, or hey, if it doesn't work, we'll pay you $5,000 for wasting your time, so on and so forth. Tracking is by far the most important way to optimize or improve. It's something that we recommend strongly in our company.
This is something that in the military, we would do simple process on a debrief, because it was very few times that we could contact the people that we were chasing, trying to capture or shooting at and say, hey, did that work well for you? Did we shoot at you effectively? It's kind of a binary yes or no. If they're there to talk, we probably didn't do a good job. But for the mission improvement that we had, every single time we got done with a sales call or a mission, we do a debrief where we'd ask, we had to do that whole thing over again. What did we learn? And if we had to do it, what would we do more, better, or differently? Well, you can absolutely do this on a sales call. And I teach this to sales teams all over the world. I say, I would rather lose a $10,000 sale today and make $1 million next year. And just happy to sacrifice 10 grand. And I even sometimes carry around cash, and I'll be like, I just put it on the table. I'll give you the money today if it gets me, 1,000 times the result tomorrow, because if I lose the sale, I'm going to ask, what could I do better so that I never lose a sale for that reason ever again?
I love that.
Maybe a variation on that reason.
I want to touch on this regarding the team. The last piece you just said of never losing the sale again for the same reason. I also teach that in retention. And I think it's just a good thing to remind people retaining clients. Losing clients is totally okay. It happens. Everyone loses clients. Losing clients for the same reason in separate time periods is not okay. Losing them at the same time, you can't do anything. But if you lost a client for X reason and then 3 months later for the same reason, you didn't do your job appropriately.
Bad on you.
Same thing with sales. So in general, though, with sales teams, one of the other methods that we teach on optimization is on the monthly recap mission debrief, if you want to call it, making sure that it's a King Arthur roundtable. The problem with sales teams is that sometimes it feels like a pyramid where the top seller or the person that's managing is speaking down to everyone. There's no benefit in that. Even the brand new salesperson can bring in new ideas, new fresh thought processes, because a lot of times salespeople have blinders on that they can't even recognize the obvious things. And yet when they coach someone else, they see what they're not seeing for their own business. It's very common. It's the cobbler's shoes metaphor, like they have the word shoes, or the maid's house is always the dirtiest. Same idea for salespeople. So if you have a mission debrief at the end of the month, everyone should have a say. Everyone should be able to get, hey, here's my takeaways from this month, by just having them do a little bit of pre-homework, like go through your data and do some of these prompts. And we have SOPs in my program, systems and operations, that are based on what was the top 5 objections you got this month? How did you deal with them? What was your rates from last month for this month? And just understanding how as a team you can learn from each other, especially if you have even 2 people, it's super, super valuable to do that.
Love it. So we've got the trigger, repeatable, and provable. Now the final piece, the M in trim, is measurable, because I'm investing time to do this differently. I'm not just, picking my notepad up and going into a neighborhood, or just getting on the LinkedIn and, smiling and dialing, as we used to say in the old school sales world, smiling and dialing. We're actually trying to do this more intelligently. And that means it's going to take more time. because we're even before the call, we're doing things differently. After the call or after the visit or after the message, I'm now assessing. That takes time. You mentioned the time was the one resource I couldn't get back. I need to measure the results of this thing to figure out, is it better than smiling and dialing or walking and knocking? So tell me, how would you measure this system to know, is it getting me better in my sales? Is it getting me worse? And yeah, revenue is, of course, something we could look at. Did we close more? But I bet you got some other ideas for things that I could be looking at to know, is this worth the extra effort I'm putting in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I kind of teased this earlier by noting that everything that's outbound should be a means to an end for inbound. The biggest reason behind that, right, is inbound inherently requires significantly less time than anything outbound, because Google or Facebook or TikTok or Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you're running ads on, they do the work for you by showing the ads for you. It's similar to like a online billboard, right? You set up the design of it one time and then you post the billboard, and then now you don't have to do any work, and now it's there for you. Same idea with inbound. So to me, the idea and goal is understanding what your cost per acquisition is on average and what your lifetime value is of your clients. So knowing these measurable KPIs, as we call it, is really, really important. So cost per acquisition is how much it actually costs financially to acquire a new client. We try not to measure the time because it's really, really hard to do that over multiple different plans. What we recommend and what we coach is the carpet bomb approach is really effective, but it's not effective in measurability. So it ends up becoming just kind of a mess. The way that we do it is, in terms of if you're newer, is if you're doing a carpet bomb approach, the thing that you're measuring is strictly the output at the end, and then focusing on that specific thing that was the best. So if you tried, for example, smiling and dialing, in person, direct mail, and LinkedIn as your 4 methods, and at the end of the month, you booked 20 meetings on LinkedIn and everything else was less than 10, then now we're going to focus on LinkedIn next month and really build a system for that. So that's first in terms of that process. The next thing that I would recommend on the measurable aspect of outbound prospecting or sales in general is just making sure, like we spoke about on the I side of things, once you come up with the optimization plans, are you actually putting it into place the following month to make sure that it's worth your time? Because again, on the LTV side of things is really key. Understanding the lifetime value of your customers on average will allow you to identify how much you're willing to spend in order to get that client, not just on an individual cost per acquisition process, but over time. So for example, if in the first month you bring on a client and you spend $1,000 for that client, but you only made $1,200 for that client, but you work with them for a year, you're expecting to make, $14,000 to $24,000 a year. It's totally okay to spend that $1,200 or $1,000 to get the client. So first, knowing your LTV and your cost per acquisition is really key, because then that will allow you to identify when you could start running ads. I think the biggest thing that I would tell anyone on here is, if you are doing a lot of outbound prospecting and you're getting solid results from it and you're taking profits into the business for yourself instead of spending it on ads, you're doing it incorrectly. You need to be transforming your outbound processes into inbound. And you might say, well, Alex, couldn't I just hire someone for the outbound? And the answer is yes, but it's not mutually exclusive. The goal is to, yes, get a process that's repeatable for your outbound, whatever it is, in person, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, doing that, hiring someone to do that, and then taking money from your outbound processes and putting it into inbound advertising so you can create a more scalable option.
This has been a great sales system because I mentioned in the beginning of the show, I never bring somebody on and don't learn from them. And I've learned a whole bunch from you that now I can take into my business. And I know all my listeners have as well. So Alex, as we close the show out, where do people find out more about you, the SOPs that you've built, the systems, the coaching, the processes? How do they get deeper into your world?
Absolutely. Easiest place is prospectingondemand.com. Easy way to find me. All of my socials are on there. I'm pretty active on pretty much every social platform. So anytime you need me, just reach out and I'll be happy to chat.
Awesome, Alex. Well, for all of you out there that are listening to Bulletproof Selling, make sure that you are following us as well on LinkedIn and YouTube, where all of these live streams are housed. And of course, the podcast that we produce out of this on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And for more sales systems to help you replace hope with certainty in how you sell, make sure you're over at bulletproofselling.us, where we're posting new content just about every day of the week out of these interviews to make sure that you can break it down into a system to grow your pipeline with. Well, Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, Alex. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.